Yeah, there have been times where Landon Donovan may have been disregarded a bit as one of the best players, but time and time again, be it for club or for country, he has proven his worth. Even in the game against Ecuador, had he played like he did against Ecuador all throughout qualifying, he would have no doubt been in the U.S. squad. But even in that game, unfortunately, it wasn't to be. The goal wasn't to be, went off the post. But even there was an essence of magic around him. These past couple of months, he has been stellar. A big part of them winning the MLS Cup. But this isn't the end of Donovan. I expect to see him back as a coach or around the game in some manner. The thing my best memory, just to be a little bit different and not to go with the goal against Algeria, I'll go with his final game. When he's coming off, there's also pre-game when they had the video tribute to him. The embrace between him and Klinsmann was actually probably the best memory I've had because, of course, they didn't get along that well, but it's just respect from one of the greatest soccer players of all time in Jurgen Klinsmann to Landon Donovan, the face of U.S. soccer for so many years. I think that was just a really special moment, and I think he ushered in a new age for U.S. soccer, and I think he brought U.S. soccer to the forefront and is really, really key in the push for soccer and its growth in America. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, in the NBA, Toronto just suffered a big loss with DeRozan being out for a long period of time. How do you think Toronto's going to compare to some of those teams?
Toronto's has an interesting scenario now. I think they had one of the more dynamic backcourts with Lowry and DeRozan. I think DeRozan was playing a big role, but DeRozan wasn't having the most amazing year, but you can just see how much changes when he goes out. The game against the Cavaliers, it just wasn't the same. The Cavaliers, of course, won the game 105-91. Amir Johnson's going to have to take over a much bigger role. He put up 27 in the last game, but it just wasn't the same. The replacement, Griffiths Vasquez, who's normally their backup point guard, 4 points, 2 of 11 from the field. It just wasn't enough. They don't have that same level of scoring. I mean, Louis Williams is not going to cut it for them. And I think it's going to hurt them a lot. I think you could see them start to fall because they had a phenomenal start to the year. They were 15-4 to start. Atlanta right on their tail. Cleveland, Washington, Chicago, they could all pass them up if they continue to play this way. I don't think they'll drop too far, but it's key for them to get DeRozan back. Blake, what do you think about the loss of DeRozan?
I think the Raptors were a team that was emerging to kind of be in the playoff standings in the Eastern Conference, and this loss is pretty big for them because I believe he's their best player right now. They're right now at 15-5. That's great for the Eastern Conference. I mean, Cleveland and Chicago are both up and down this season. I mean, they were the team I thought that had a real chance to capitalize on their schedule early on. Now with the loss of DeRozan, you look at their schedule, and they're going to have to play at Cleveland in 2 games, and then on the road versus New York and Indiana. I mean, it's pretty detrimental to their schedule, and I think they're going to lose ground in the East.
Okay. Bradley, anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, wanting to hear your opinion on how OSU made the playoffs over TCU and Baylor. So I think TCU had a great year.
Yeah, I think this brings us perfectly into transition into our next subject, which is college football. Blake, you want to talk about this first, or should I?
I think I should go about it first, because I know you're going to have a lot to talk about. But with that being said, I really just could not understand some of the things that the College Football Playoff Committee did, such as putting Florida State at number 4 last week, putting TCU at number 3 last week, and then throwing them on the bus and putting them at number 6 after winning by 52 points. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous the way these teams are just shifting around. I think the SEC's had a down year, yet they've just given Alabama so much lift. Oregon, another team too. Oregon suffered a loss to Arizona, and then they blew them out this weekend, but Oregon's been sitting pretty at number 2 for a long, long time. I think Florida State needs to get more credit. I also think Baylor needed to get more credit because they're the team that beat TCU, and they have 1 loss on the season. Ohio State has a really, really bad loss to Virginia Tech. And also, Ohio State is playing with their third-string quarterback right now. And I think if you look at it on paper, the team that had a better chance to beat Alabama was Baylor or TCU, not an Ohio State team with a third-string quarterback.
I would disagree. I would disagree strongly. TCU, first of all, they played a horrifying team in Iowa State. Beating Iowa State by 52 is like us beating Maryland by 50. Iowa State is probably one of the worst teams in college football. They lost to North Dakota State, who doesn't even play technically Division I. They are, of course, an FCS team. Look, I think that there were 6 teams deserving of 4 playoff spots. And at the end of the day, what really hurt was the fact that the Big 12 didn't have a championship game. And that killed TCU. And you want to look at wins. Look at quality wins. Ohio State had better wins than TCU did. They had a worse loss, but their overall strength of schedule was better. The overall win-loss of their opponents was significantly higher. And they just proved time and time again that it doesn't matter which quarterback they have in there. The big issue with TCU was the conference championship game. And I think that really, really hurt the Big 12. The Big 12 needs the championship game. And I will agree with you about...
Real quick. We have to ask Bradley his last thing. Brad, what is your opinion on it? Do you think TCU and Baylor deserved it over Ohio State? I just want to make sure the caller can get involved with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that when OSU loses to Virginia Tech, and, I mean, they finished 6-6 in the ACC, which is not the best. I mean, when you compare that to TCU's loss, it's not that big of a deal, really.
Here's my issue, though. If you want to do that, they lost to Baylor. But Baylor, so you put Baylor over TCU by transitive property. But Baylor lost to West Virginia, a team that went 7-5 and was not even that much better record-wise. That's my big issue. The whole issue with the Big 12 is they didn't have a decisive game. Had Baylor beaten TCU or TCU beaten Baylor, that team would have made it over Ohio State without a doubt. Because they would have had that one more decisive victory to prove to everybody they were the best team. And Art Briles is absolutely right in his tirade after the game. The Big 12, they have this whole one champion thing, and they screwed themselves over by going out the back door and allowing co-champions.
My thing, though, is, that was a great victory against Wisconsin. You guys thoroughly dominated Wisconsin. But my thing is, I think the way in which the Big Ten championship is built, I think the West is significantly less competitive than the East, and you have a Wisconsin team that everybody thinks is super good going into the game, but Wisconsin lost to Northwestern. I'm sorry, Northwestern is a horrible team.
Couldn't we say the same thing about Georgia Tech, though? And the ACC, the other side of the ACC is not that strong, to be perfectly honest. The same thing about the SEC. Missouri and Georgia are not up par with Alabama, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn. I think it's the similar also in the Pac-12, where you've got one side that has Oregon, and the next side is just jumbled up with a lot of good teams, but doesn't have a team at the same level of Oregon. I think we have this issue that conferences have become so imbalanced that we have a conference championship that means more than a non-conference than a regular season game that is actually a better game.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait on this discussion and see what happens in the actual playoffs. But for now, Ohio State in the playoffs, Baylor and TCU not. But thank you for Bradley for calling in and getting a heated discussion started up.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradley. We also have Matt Stolboff calling in, and he's been waiting patiently as well, so we will try to get him on in a few seconds. But, I think we transitioned well into our next topic. What's next, Blake?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the playoffs and just the matchups in general and what you think the neutral site games are going to matter because you know how the playoffs works. Alabama got to the Sugar Bowl because that's the closest location to their home stadium. Oh, we have a caller. Let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah, we got Matt Stolboff on the show, a fellow Infinity Sports Network member. Matt, how you doing?
Look, guys, I'm doing good.
What do you want?
So, as we've all just talking about right now, around 12:45 or so, we figured out that TCU and Baylor did not make the playoff. TCU dropping 3 spots, even after killing Iowa State, and Baylor not making it either. I mean, I'm just wondering, do you think, in the future, could we possibly see a 6 or 8 team playoff?
Yeah, I think that's the real question now. Is a 6 or 8 team playoff the best option? And there was the poll that saw that most people would prefer the 8 team playoff. And I think it's an intriguing decision because there were definitely 6 teams this year that deserved to be in. And it's a little bit unfair to Baylor and TCU. Of course, you expand to 8 teams, and then you get the debate of which 2-loss teams should make it. And it gets so complicated. And I do think there should be an 8-team playoff, though. I do not think it's fair to go with the top 4 teams and maybe leave 2 teams out. I would like to see an 8-team playoff in which you have all members of the Power 5 represented, as well as at least one team from a group of 5 or non-Power 5 school, just to, throw them in there a bit, because I think that opens up the possibility for expansion and maybe even get another conference, more involved in it. You never know. You could see a team like Marshall, maybe even this year Colorado State, Boise State, find their way into a playoff and maybe make some noise. Blake, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the rankings right now for the college football playoff, and the 5th seed would be Baylor, 6th would be TCU, 7 Mississippi State, 8 Michigan State. Mississippi State and Michigan State were the only 2 Power 6 conference teams that had 2 losses. So, I think they pretty fair with 8. Michigan State and Mississippi State were both pretty good programs this year. Mississippi State losing to 2 really tough opponents in Ole Miss and Alabama. I would be perfectly fine, in my opinion, with the 8-team playoff.
Yeah.
You feel more into it, and it's more exciting. The ratings would definitely go up, I think, with 8.
I agree. I think you open up the chance for a lot better matchups. Blake, what do you think?
I think, guys, let's think about it like this. Last year we got rid of the BCS, and now, yes, Baylor and TCU are very, very disappointed they didn't get in, but imagine the outrage that would have gone on today if we were still in the BCS system. It would have been Alabama would have made it, and it would have been a battle between either Florida State or Oregon. And if Florida State didn't get in, do you know how many people would just be absolutely throwing up in disgust, a 13-0 team not getting in? But then the same thing would happen if Oregon didn't get in, a team which went 12-1, played dominant the whole season. So think of the outrage that would have happened if we had the BCS. Now we're talking about this disappointment and how the system could be messed up and how we need to expand it. But got to give this new college football ranking some credit, because I think for the most part they got it right. Yes, there were 2 teams that were both disappointed, and they're both from the same conference, which is a little shaky, but I think this new playoff system is good for right now. And also, you got to think about these guys. They're student athletes. To move it to 8 teams, that would require these teams to maybe play 16 games or so a season. That's a lot of games for college football. These guys are in the classroom doing schoolwork along with being football players. I think the NCAA isn't ready for college football to have 16 or 15 games in a season. That would just be too much at this point in time.
Just my personal opinion, just straight up. Look, I think that the thing is you have to give them at least 2 more years before you can even think of moving into the 8 team, because you don't know what could happen. You could theoretically have next year where we have 2 teams that are really deserving and then a bunch of teams that end up with 2 loss, and it gets a little more complicated. Or you could just have 4 teams straight up that are deserving and that's it. I think there's a lot of scenarios. I do think the 8 team is the best system in the long run. How they will change scheduling maybe to limit games is a good question. But I think I want to see how this plays out. I want to see whether or not over the next couple of years the committee starts to iron things out, starts to figure out how they want to do it and how they don't. I think one of the big things that I think it's important to remember is that this system is not based week to week. It is a clean slate each and every week, which means if you're 6 one week, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You are a new team. It's a completely blank slate. And to a certain extent, I think that's gotten a lot of people upset because we're still in the BCS mindset where you're jumping over teams, which is just not actually a thing, really, in the new college football playoff. However, with an 18 team playoff, that wouldn't be as much of an issue. Not to mention, it would be pretty entertaining to watch some of the lower teams, especially the teams that are in the conference championships, see how they would deal with teams that lose in conference championships versus teams that maybe have a better record but didn't play in the conference championships. Opens up a whole new world of possibility. Matt, anything else you want to talk about?
No, because I was really bummed out. I really wanted either TCU or Baylor to win. They both look great, on Saturday. And Ohio State looked really good, too. I know Noah, you're a big OSU fan.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you're happy, but to be honest, probably most of America is a little upset about the decision today.
Okay. I mean, I'll deal with that. I know most people